Well, oh, you make me want to shout, did it? You know the song. I think it was Lulu, wasn't it? What is she doing there, though? She's adding texture and interest to what would otherwise sound like a long, boring tone, and we kind of need that texture and interest when we play flute as well. I am a bit distracted by all these notifications that I've got to take off, so forgive me for that. When we're playing the Native American flute, for me this is when I get to the longer notes, perhaps at the end of the phrase. So just to demo that alone. I kind of start off relatively medium and then slow it right down with my vibrato, we call it. Without that, it sounds something like this. It's just a long, constant noise, sound, vibration. And don't get me wrong, because there are circumstances and styles in which you would embrace that. And I think it's down to each individual musician, artist, flutist, whatever, flautist, to use their discretion and their creativity with that. But more often than not, we would like to create vibrato, so it's more. You can do it quicker. There's different ways that we can do it. So what is actually happening here? I tend to implement this at the end of a phrase, and maybe only for the second half of that last longer note, just to create that interest. And I think with my style of playing in particular, it works well to do fairly slow vibrato. However, most people are fixated on trying to speed up their vibrato, and that's fine. I guess I've never really found that I would need to. But just doing that demo there makes me realise, that's something that I could practice myself actually. The point is, I understand vibrato and I use it within my own playing the way that I would like to, and I know enough about vibrato to be able to teach you how to do it, how to begin to implement it. And I'm not going to give you one, not two, but 3 ways of doing that on the flute today. So it's beginning to get into the realms of more advanced flute playing. It's like, perhaps if you haven't, by the way, found my other videos that are on flute lessons for beginners, there's 5 really good, it's like a mini series on this YouTube channel of that. And if you are fairly new to flute playing on the Native American style flute, then I would thoroughly recommend going back and having a look at those videos. And when you get to a point where you feel like, oh yeah, what's that vibrato? And that could be now, there's nothing wrong, there's no real order of what we learn and when we learn it. But I would say that this is stepping into kind of medium stroke, kind of advanced flute playing. It's another one of those tricks, it's another one of those expressions that's going to really help us step further into our flute playing, become more expressionate, and to have more texture and more interest to fall back on, not unless fall back on is probably wrong, but to utilize, to have at our disposal. And I've told you when I might implement it, you implement it whenever you would like within your own playing. So what's happening here with the actual breath is it's coming from the diaphragm, but not necessarily. It can come from the throat. What you might find when you use it from the throat, which is actually easier to implement, easier to deliver, is that you might get very tired. And say if you're playing flute a lot in a ceremony or on stage or just practicing really, you might find that those muscles become tired too quickly. And maybe that's something that you can develop and rely on, I don't know. But actually, there's an additional depth coming from the diaphragm, and when we're bringing in the diaphragm. So rather than from the throat, we're almost coming back into the realms of pranayama breathwork or something, you know. It's coming from much deeper, and it's almost like a swoosh. It's almost like a swoosh. So just feel free to practice that and bringing that breath in, delivering the breath. I think it's easier to deliver when you get halfway through your breath. Try to begin to speed it up. It just seems where there's less velocity coming out when we come towards the end of the breath, that it's easier to engage the diaphragm and to deliver that kind of a swoosh, almost like. But it's like a vibration, and it's not necessarily an emphasized. You get the gist. It is quite something to practice until it just comes naturally. You'll find yourself naturally. So it is definitely something that you need to consciously practice, but it becomes something that you don't really think about and you just deliver it. In fact, I find it much easier to deliver when I'm not actually focused on it. But so that's one, from the diaphragm. Two, from the throat. So from the throat, you can even introduce a different texture to it. It's quicker, it's quite naturally quicker from the throat. So if you play with that one as well, you can feel that it's almost a little bit more stuttery. And do you know, don't get hung up on that's not smooth. Everybody loves a beautifully evenly spaced vibrato, smooth as you like. That's perfect. That's what you'll hear in people singing. That's what you'll hear in many people's flute playing as well. But don't get like so worried that if yours isn't actually some different styles of vibrato, and maybe that almost like stuttering, that has a different energy to it, and depending on how you're playing and what you're putting around that vibrato, then there's nothing to say that can't be a beautiful energy itself, you know. So don't worry about your vibrato having to be perfect. It will develop quite naturally over time anyway. Subtle as well. You see that the last time when I just tailed off at the end there, it's more subtle than the, you know, more exaggerated. So we can play with the strength of the vibrato, you know, just because we're able to develop, because this is one of those things that you will develop as you go along over time. But just because you've developed a really strong vibrato doesn't mean you'll deliver that vibrato at its maximum strength all the time. Like everything else in flute playing and with breath control, there's even down to a pop, there's times to do the pop and the hop and stuff like that. Again, go back to the beginners videos with maximum accentuated to the maximum, but there's times to tail off and give a real subtle pop and a real subtle vibrato, or whatever. It applies to everything that we do with the flute. Sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's stronger, and it really depends, and that in itself gives us different cadence, it gives us different textures, melodies and everything. So let's demonstrate that. So you might want to go hard pops, but then you might tiny pop just at the end there. In fact, I've stopped the breath literally just after I've made the pop, so it's much softer rather than, you know. So it's the same with everything that we do in flute, including vibrato. Now here's the thing we have learned how to do with the breath from the diaphragm, and that has more depth and richness, and once practiced, probably more stability and consistency and even spacing and smoothness generally than delivering from the throat. But not always. Some people practice like mad from the throat, so I'm just saying. But what happens if we want to do a kind of vibrato, but we haven't really nailed that aspect of it? Well, if we look at some of the most talented flute players out there and whistle players out there, to the Irish tin whistle folk style music over in Ireland, I would say they're the most, particularly when we're looking at dexterity, they are definitely up there as the most talented flute players. I mean, they're just incredible what they do, both with the low D whistle, because it's such a stretch, and piper's grip and everything that's going on there as well. But the way that they augment their playing is not necessarily always from the breath, but a lot of it comes from the fingers. And so one of the things that you might see them doing is kind of like our flutter that we've learned again in other videos. And I think I have touched on this. What happens if we flutter but not fully cover the note? In actual fact, what if we flutter and we're only literally hovering? Like, you can see the gap there. It looks, from some angles, it looks like I'm covering. Actually, I'm nowhere near. I'm nowhere near the note. I'm just affecting just enough to affect its flow. And what does that sound like? There's fractions there. I'm going away and I'm coming back, and that's something you can practice as well. So you've got your flutter. The furthest away from the hole that you can get, but with it still having some kind of effect. It's much more subtle and it sounds just like vibrato. So there's something that you can use whilst you develop your own vibrato in the breath. You're welcome. So we started off with Lulu and we ended up with Irish flute playing tricks to bring in. You know, hats off to all the world flutes out there. You know, there's some beautiful, in fact, they're all equally beautiful, I would say, in their own right and in their own context and in their own time and place, really, you know. And different flutes resonate with different people, and I'm beginning to resonate with more and more world flutes now. Obviously the Fuyara, very difficult. Kind of wish I bought a smaller one. Still a Fuyara, still a massive overtone flute, but actually that one is taking so much breath, it's taking so much practice that it almost needs you to be able to circular breathe on it from the get-go, because the phrases on it are so short. But anyway, that's one that I'm practicing. Irish tin whistle, particularly the low D whistle, for me is something that I'm practicing on and getting gradually better. I practice about 5 or 10 minutes a day on that, and I'm embracing other things like the Cavall coming soon. I'll do a demo on that, and maybe Bansuri, and I've considered, but I think possibly I've ruled out for now the shakuhachi. they're all equally beautiful. And what goes for the Native American style flute, which is in my mind equally beautiful but so much easier to play than a lot of the things that I've just mentioned there, particularly rim-blown flutes like shakuhachi. I'm getting confused. Bansuri is obviously a cross-blown embouchure flute, and things like the ney are also, they're really hard, and they also play in the second octave, which again is just all about breath control really, and slightly different fingering when you change from one octave to the other. So it plays the whole scale, but then it plays the whole scale again in a higher version. That's essentially a higher octave. And I guess the Native American style flute is a little bit restricted in that way. You can get one or two notes perhaps at the bottom that you might get in addition to the single octave, but that's just the way that the thing is designed, and the way that it is designed is also what makes it incredibly easy to play, because all you have to do is blow in that hole, and this block mechanism and the way that the air flows through into the slow air chamber, up underneath the block and across that sound hole for you, means that you don't have to be the one creating all the angles and the embouchure and everything like that as well. So it's kind of less direct, and I think that's one of the reasons that you can't manage to get, it doesn't thank you for trying to play in the second octave, put it that way. So anyway, that's enough about me. Went a little bit off topic towards the end there, but 3 different ways to deliver vibrato within your playing. Love to hear your messages. Is that useful for you? What would you like me to cover in the next video? We'll be talking about playing on the edge of things the next time, but I'm open for and actually looking for your inspiration of something that I might be able to come on and help you with. Hopefully, all being well. All right, many thanks. Lots of love to everybody, and speak to you soon.